Right now, the ground is not becoming angrier, but our cities are becoming more exposed. In Venezuela, twin earthquakes turned fragile buildings into traps. In Japan, a similar magnitude triggered warnings, evacuations, and almost no deaths. In California, new research says 2 dangerous fault systems are carrying their highest stress in 1,000 years. And across the Ring of Fire, millions are asking the same question: is something bigger coming? The honest answer is scarier than a conspiracy. Earth is behaving like Earth. The disaster is what humans built on top of it, and what we failed to prepare now. There's a mistake people make every time earthquake news appears on the screen. They look at the dates, see several major events in the same month, and assume the planet must be entering a new phase. Venezuela shakes. Japan issues a tsunami warning. California publishes alarming fault research. The Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Nicaragua, and other regions register strong tremors. The pattern feels too neat to ignore. But earthquakes are not messages. They are releases of stress along faults that have been storing energy for years, decades, or centuries. The real story is not that Earth suddenly changed. The real story is that the same planet we have always lived on is now pushing against cities, coastlines, hospitals, airports, and apartment blocks that were built with very different levels of preparation. In one country, a magnitude 7 event becomes a national catastrophe. In another, a similar magnitude becomes a terrifying afternoon with minimal casualties. The ground may start the disaster, but human decisions decide how far the disaster goes. On June 24, 2026, northern Venezuela was hit by a devastating earthquake sequence west of Caracas. USGS recorded a pair of strong events, including a magnitude 7. 2 followed seconds later by a magnitude 7. 5, with shallow rupture depth and major landslide hazard. That combination is brutal. A shallow earthquake releases its energy close to the surface, so buildings above the rupture receive the shaking with very little geological cushioning. When the affected buildings are old, poorly reinforced, or already weakened by years of neglect, the result is collapse. That is what made Venezuela so vulnerable. The earthquake did not strike a wealthy, perfectly maintained, fully prepared region. It struck a country already carrying a long humanitarian and infrastructure crisis. Hospitals, roads, power systems, communications, networks, and ordinary housing had been under pressure long before the ground moved. When the shaking began, millions of people were not facing only geology. They were facing geology plus poverty, geology plus weak construction, geology plus limited emergency capacity, geology plus chaos. Reports from the affected region describe damaged buildings, overwhelmed medical facilities, displaced families, sanitation problems, and missing people. Relief groups warned that health risks often grow after the shaking stops because survivors gather in shelters, clean water becomes harder to access, chronic illnesses go untreated, and infections spread in crowded conditions. This is one of the cruel truths about earthquakes. The shaking may last under a minute, but the disaster can continue for months. To understand why building quality matters so much, picture 2 people standing the same distance from the same epicenter. One is inside a reinforced modern structure designed to bend, with steel properly tied through concrete columns, shear walls placed where engineers expect the lateral force, and foundations connected to the frame. The other is inside an unreinforced masonry building where heavy walls support themselves by weight alone. The ground acceleration may be identical for both people, but their survival odds are not. The first building absorbs motion, the second may break into the objects that kill the occupants. This is why the phrase earthquake-proof is misleading. No serious engineer promises a building cannot be damaged. The real goal is life safety. The building may crack, walls may fail, furniture may fall, and repairs may be expensive. But the structure should not pancake while people are inside. Japan's strongest buildings do not defeat earthquakes. They manage motion. They give the shaking somewhere to go. They turn violent energy into controlled deformation instead of sudden collapse. Local soil can make the same earthquake feel different from one neighborhood to the next. Soft sediment can amplify shaking, while water-saturated ground can lose strength through liquefaction, behaving more like a fluid than solid ground. That is why some of the worst damage in major earthquakes appears far from the fault trace, in river valleys, coastal fills, reclaimed land, and old lake beds. A city is not one risk zone. It is a patchwork of geology, construction, and density. Aftershocks add another layer. People often think the disaster is over when the main shaking stops, but damaged buildings are weakest in the hours and days afterward. A smaller aftershock can finish what the main shock started. Rescue workers must enter unstable spaces. Families return for documents, medicine, or relatives. Officials have to decide which buildings are safe without enough inspectors. That is why the first rule after a major earthquake is not only to survive the initial shaking, it is to stay away from damaged structures until they are checked. The first 72 hours are the hardest because help may not reach everyone immediately. Roads can be blocked, bridges closed, airports damaged, and phone networks overloaded. In a widespread disaster, emergency services must prioritize collapsed buildings, fires, hospitals, and critical infrastructure. Ordinary families may need to manage on their own for days. That is why emergency supplies are not paranoia. They are a way to reduce pressure on rescue systems, so responders can reach people who are trapped or critically injured. There is also a mental health side most videos ignore. Earthquakes remove the illusion that the ground is stable. Survivors may feel phantom shaking for weeks. Children may fear sleeping indoors. Adults may panic at truck vibrations or doors slamming. Communities recover physically and psychologically. Good disaster planning includes shelter, food, medicine, sanitation, and information, but also trust. People need clear updates, honest numbers, and leaders who do not hide bad news to protect their image. The worst mistake after disaster is treating preparedness as a temporary mood. For 2 weeks, everyone cares. Then the news cycle moves on. Politicians make speeches, and buildings remain unchanged. But the fault does not move on. It keeps storing stress. Real resilience is boring follow-through. Inspections, retrofits, drills, land use planning, hospital backup power, water storage, and emergency communication systems that still function when the internet does not. If that sounds expensive, compare it with the cost of collapse. Retrofitting a school before a quake feels optional until children are inside it. Strengthening a bridge feels bureaucratic until ambulances cannot cross it. Preparedness always looks overpriced before disaster and cheap afterward. The problem is that afterward is too late for the people under the concrete. The budget decision made today becomes the survival statistic written into tomorrow's disaster report for someone else later. A magnitude 7. 5 earthquake is not just slightly stronger than a magnitude 6. 5. The magnitude scale is logarithmic. Each whole number increase means about 10 times greater wave amplitude and roughly 32 times more energy released. So when a quake moves from the 6 range into the 7 range, the energy jump is enormous, but magnitude alone does not decide the outcome. Depth matters. Distance from population matters. Soil matters. Building codes matter. Rescue access matters. Government capacity matters. 2 earthquakes can look similar on paper and produce completely different human consequences. That comparison became painfully clear when Japan recorded a major offshore earthquake on April 20th, 2026, near the Sanriku coast. USGS listed it at magnitude 7. 4, while Japan's meteorological agency initially reported a higher value. The quake triggered tsunami warnings, and waves were observed along parts of the coast, including around 80 centimeters at Kuji port. Evacuation advisories and orders pushed people away from vulnerable coastal areas, trains were suspended, and officials warned residents to stay prepared for possible larger activity. Yet the outcome was dramatically different from Venezuela. Japan's shaking was frightening, but the death toll remained at 0, with only minor injuries reported. That was not luck. It was the result of decades of seismic culture. Japan builds for earthquakes. It drills for earthquakes. Its transport systems are designed to stop automatically. Its coastal communities know tsunami routes. Its public warning systems are part of daily life. Children learn what to do before they become adults. The country does not treat earthquakes as rare surprises. It treats them as recurring national reality. This contrast is the most important lesson in the entire story. Earthquakes do not kill equally. Buildings kill. Delayed warnings kill. Bad concrete kills. Corruption kills. Poverty kills. Lack of drills kills. When Japan suffers a 7, 4, and survives with minimal casualties, it proves that preparation changes the ending. When Venezuela suffers a 7, 5, and communities collapse, it proves that vulnerability turns natural hazard into human tragedy. Now look at California, because the danger there is not only a past event. It is a future one, sitting under one of the most populated regions in the United States. In June 2026, researchers reported that stress along parts of the San Andreas and San Jacinto fault systems in Southern California has reached the highest level seen in 1,000 years of modeling. That sentence should not be exaggerated into a prediction. It does not mean an earthquake will happen tomorrow at a known time. Earthquake prediction does not work that way, but it does mean the stored stress is serious. The San Andreas Fault is a boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. These plates are moving past one another, but parts of the fault lock instead of sliding smoothly. When a locked section does not rupture for a long time, stress accumulates in the surrounding rock. Eventually, the rocks fail and the fault slips. That sudden slip is the earthquake. Southern California has been waiting a long time for a major release on key segments. The new study matters because it looked not just at one fault, but at how 2 major systems may interact. The San Andreas and San Jacinto faults come near each other around Cajon Pass, a critical junction northeast of Los Angeles. Researchers describe conditions under which a rupture might pass through this region and involve more than one fault system. A multi-fault earthquake can spread damage across a broader area than a simple single-segment rupture. For emergency planners, that is the difference between one corridor of destruction and a regional crisis. A magnitude 7, 5 to 7, 8 event in Southern California would not be a movie scene. It would be hospitals losing power, water pipes breaking, gas lines igniting, freeways cracking, cell towers failing, older apartment blocks becoming unsafe, and emergency vehicles trapped behind debris. Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, the Coachella Valley, and surrounding communities are connected by infrastructure that crosses active faults. When the ground moves, the systems that keep the region alive move with it. California is not unprepared. Newer buildings follow stronger seismic codes. The shake alert system can send warnings seconds before strong shaking reaches some areas. Scientists understand the faults better than ever. But the problem is the old city beneath the modern city. Older, soft-story apartments, vulnerable concrete buildings, aging water mains, fuel lines, bridges, and neighborhoods, where retrofit money arrives slowly. Risk is never evenly distributed. The poorest residents are often the least protected. This is where earthquake early warning becomes vital, but also misunderstood. Early warning systems do not predict earthquakes days in advance. They detect the first fast P waves after a rupture begins and send alerts before the slower, more damaging waves arrive. Depending on distance, that warning may be only a few seconds, or it may be tens of seconds. That is not enough time to evacuate a city, but it is enough time to drop, cover, and hold on, stop trains, pause surgeries, open firehouse doors, slow industrial machinery, and move away from dangerous equipment. Japan has spent years integrating these systems into public life. The United States has Shake Alert across California, Oregon, and Washington, serving tens of millions of residents and visitors. Other countries use different systems, including dedicated sensors and smartphone-based detection. The lesson is not that technology removes danger. The lesson is that seconds matter when people know what to do with them. Still, one warning must be clear. Seeing several earthquakes around the world in the same week does not mean they caused each other. Venezuela's fault system and Japan's subduction zone are separated by thousands of kilometers in completely different tectonic settings. California's San Andreas system is not being triggered by Venezuela. Earth is active all the time. USGS records show that the world expects about 15 magnitude 7 earthquakes and 1 magnitude 8 or larger earthquake in an average year. Clusters happen naturally because global seismicity is constant. The Pacific Ring of Fire adds to the confusion because it really is extremely active. It stretches around the Pacific Ocean through places such as Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, New Zealand, Alaska, the west coasts of the Americas, and parts of Oceania. It contains many of the world's subduction zones and volcanoes and accounts for a large share of earthquakes and eruptions. But it is not one connected fuse. An earthquake in Japan does not mean California must rupture next week. The Ring of Fire is a collection of active boundaries, not a single machine. The question is not whether Earth is sending a warning. The question is whether humans are listening to the warning that has always been there. Millions of people now live in megacities built near active faults. Tokyo, Istanbul, Manila, Jakarta, Los Angeles, Mexico City, Lima, Bogota, and many more. Some of these cities have strong building codes and disaster cultures. Others have explosive growth, informal construction, limited enforcement, and massive inequality. The hazard is geological. The risk is social. Istanbul is one of the clearest examples. The North Anatolian fault system runs near the city beneath the Sea of Marmara, and scientists have warned for years that a major earthquake is a realistic threat. The April 2025 magnitude 6. 2 Marmara earthquake caused panic and hundreds of injuries, even though it was not the long-feared major event. Studies have estimated a significant probability of a magnitude 7, 3 or larger earthquake near Istanbul within 30 years, especially when stress transfer and time dependence are considered. Istanbul is not Venezuela, and it is not Japan. It sits between those examples with major institutional capacity, but also enormous exposure. Millions live near vulnerable structures. Retrofitting has progressed, but not fast enough for the scale of the threat. The lesson is the same as California's lesson. A city does not become safe because people discuss the risk. It becomes safer when weak buildings are strengthened, evacuation routes are practiced, emergency supplies are stored, and leaders spend money before disaster makes spending unavoidable. Earthquake preparation is boring until the day it becomes priceless. It means water stored in containers. It means food for at least 72 hours. It means flashlights, batteries, radios, medicines, first aid kits, shoes near the bed, and family communication plans. It means knowing how to shut off gas. It means anchoring heavy furniture and securing water heaters. It means checking whether your building is vulnerable and demanding action from landlords or local officials. None of this is cinematic. All of it saves lives. The human brain struggles with earthquake risk because the timing is uncertain. A scientist can say a fault has high stress, but not the exact hour it will rupture. That uncertainty makes people delay action. Maybe it will not happen this year. Maybe it will not happen in my lifetime. Maybe someone else will solve it. But faults do not work on human attention spans. Stress accumulates quietly whether people are prepared or not. That is why Japan's example is so powerful. Japan cannot stop earthquakes. It cannot stop subduction. It cannot erase the Japan Trench or the memory of 2011. What it can do is build structures that move without collapsing, train communities to respond without chaos, and maintain warning systems that turn seconds into action. The result in April 2026 was not perfect safety, but it was proof that preparation transforms outcomes. Venezuela's tragedy shows the other side. When a country enters a major earthquake with fragile buildings, weak infrastructure, stressed hospitals, and limited coordination, the shaking becomes only the first blow. The second blow is the collapse of systems people depend on afterward. Communication fails, roads block, medical care slows, missing people remain missing, survivors face heat, disease, displacement, and trauma. The earthquake ends, but the suffering expands. California now faces a question that is less dramatic but more urgent. Will it act while the danger is still abstract? The San Andreas and San Jacinto findings should not be used to create panic thumbnails about the world cracking open tomorrow. They should be used to push retrofits, public education, insurance awareness, water resilience, fire prevention, hospital readiness, and neighborhood-level planning. Panic fades. Preparedness remains. The same is true in every earthquake zone. Whether someone lives in Pakistan, Turkey, Japan, Chile, Indonesia, the Philippines, Mexico, California, or the Caribbean, the personal steps are remarkably similar. Know your hazard. Secure your home. Practice drop, cover, and hold on. Prepare supplies. Make a contact plan. Learn evacuation routes if you live near a coast where tsunami risk exists. Do not wait for the ground to teach you. A tsunami warning is especially serious because the earthquake is not always the most dangerous part. Offshore thrust earthquakes can displace the seafloor and send waves racing across the ocean. The first wave may not be the largest. Harbors can surge long after the initial warning. If officials tell coastal residents to move to higher ground, the correct response is immediate movement, not filming the shoreline. Japan's April warning did not produce a catastrophic tsunami, but the evacuation was still the right decision. Warnings are judged by lives protected, not by whether every worst-case scenario happens. There is also a responsibility for media creators. Earthquake content can save lives, or it can spread fear. Saying the planet is breaking apart may get clicks, but it teaches nothing useful. Saying all recent quakes are connected may feel exciting, but it is not science. The stronger story is the true one. Earth is constantly active. Large earthquakes are expected, and the difference between survival and catastrophe is often made years before the event. So, if this video has one message, it is this. Do not ask only where the next earthquake will happen. Ask what will happen when it does. Will the building stand? Will the alerts arrive? Will the hospital function? Will the roads stay open? Will families know where to meet? Will emergency crews have equipment? Will the poorest neighborhoods receive the same protection as the richest ones? These are the questions that decide death tolls. The ground beneath us is older than every country, every border, and every argument. Tectonic plates have been moving for billions of years. They will keep moving after every city we know is gone. We cannot negotiate with plate boundaries. We cannot vote away stored stress. We cannot promise a fault to wait until budgets improve. But we can decide whether our buildings, systems, and habits respect the planet we actually live on. Venezuela showed what happens when a strong earthquake hits weakness. Japan showed what happens when a strong earthquake hits preparation. California is now staring at a fault system scientists say is carrying extraordinary stress. Istanbul is staring at a seismic gap beneath a crowded sea. The ring of fire continues its endless motion. None of this means the end of the world. It means the world is working exactly as it always has. The uncomfortable truth is that the next major earthquake has already been prepared underground. We just do not know which city will be above it when it releases. Somewhere, a locked fault is bending. Somewhere, rock is holding against pressure it cannot hold forever. Somewhere, a community is either ready or pretending it has more time. And when the shaking comes, the planet will not ask who believed the warning. It will only reveal who prepared. That is why this matters now, before the next headline, before the next siren, before the next collapse. The lesson is not fear. The lesson is responsibility. Earthquakes are inevitable. Mass death is not. The difference is what we build, what we reinforce, what we practice, and whether we take the science seriously while the ground is still still. So leave the question below. Have you ever felt an earthquake, and where were you when it happened? Because behind every magnitude number is a human memory, and behind every warning is a chance to survive the next one. That choice begins before the next siren ever sounds again tonight.